Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Board Games Hitting My Table. This is where I talk about all of the games that I have played over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the first half of August 2024. Now I've only got 6 games here to talk about, but they are interesting ones. But before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's start with Zoovas. So this is the reprint of the classic Quo Vadis with a new theme, which I must admit I'm not massively keen on. I don't think the mechanisms of the game lend itself to this theme very well, despite the amazing artwork. The original game had like this Roman Senate theme, which I thought worked a lot better. But I must admit the gameplay changes in this reprint are an improvement, especially where each of the characters that you play have a unique power, and you can only use those powers to assist other players, which I think is a really nice twist on the game. Now this is like a negotiation style game where you're trying to navigate your way up this map, striking deals to let other players, so hopefully other players vote for you to let you continue and hopefully reach the star exhibit. If you're in that star exhibit by the end of the game, then it will be the player with the most victory points who will be crowned the winner. Now, I really like negotiation games, and I must admit this is a really good one. This is right up there with the best negotiation games. But I must admit it is maybe a little bit more forced in terms of striking those deals when comparing to other negotiation games, such as my favourite one, Chinatown. And this game, you know, it is competing with a game like Chinatown for time on my table. They are different enough, but I think the feel of the game is certainly similar. Now, this most recent game was interesting. We used those powers of each character to, quite a lot, to be honest, throughout the game. Some interesting deals were struck. And it all came down to a very small margin. I think I won by just about a point. So, every decision you make in this game, every deal you strike is important. And we all managed to get back to that star exhibit. So, we were in that kind of safety net, and nobody ended up getting caught or not making it to that finish line. Now, I enjoyed the game a lot. I feel I enjoy it a little bit more than my game group do, which is, fair enough. Not all games work for everybody, but this is one of those games that's more difficult to get the most from for me, because it does start to peak at, at least 4 players really. You want 5, 6 players to get the most from it, and I rarely get that. Whereas if I'm playing a game like Chinatown, then I am still going to get a lot from it, even if I'm playing with, say, 4 players, because it does work really well at that player count. But still, I really do like this one. I'm not sure if it's going to stay around much longer because, well, for those reasons I've already explained. But still, I do. I always appreciate getting this one to the table, because it does feel so different to a lot of the other games out there, and it's unlike any other Knizia game that I've played. So that is Zoovas. On to a smaller game now. We played a 3-player game of Faraway just to finish a games night off. And this is a very difficult game to get a lot from, in my opinion, because the rules are a little bit counterintuitive, and not in a bad way. Just the fact that you are starting off with your most ambitious cards, and you're building this tableau from left to right, trying to get the resources to pay for the earlier cards, but you score from right to left. So you play from left to right and you score from right to left, which is a little bit of a mind-boggling mechanism, at least the first time or first few times you've played it, or if you've gone for a lapse of time where you've not played this game. And I think this game was probably the strongest example of us doing well. Normally 1 or 2 players have a bit of a crash and burn experience where none of the cards they have played are scoring. But in this one, it was a very close game. I think we all, we're all in the 60s, 70s or 80 points, which is pretty good from previous experience where you could end up getting 20 points or even worse than that. So it's a tough game to squeeze points from. One of my favourite games in terms of the art style. It has this kind of Studio Ghibli style artwork, which looks fantastic on the table and definitely does look distinct. A nice quick game. I like the initiative system where you're playing these cards which all have a numerical value on them. The lower card you play means you get first draft on the next card, but if you play higher cards, you're more likely to get these bonus cards that can add to your kind of resources or additional scoring criteria. This one is been steady for me for the beginning. I always rated it, at least a 7, but I think it's even climbing for me because I do like that. I actually do like the harshness and the tightness of the game, as well as how fast it is in relation to the decisions that have to be made. So that is Far Away. Thoroughly enjoyed that play. A regular feature on this series is Rumble Nation. I played a 4-player game of Rumble Nation, and this is another game where you could easily leave the game with very few points because it has this kind of steamrolling mechanism where the rich get richer usually. But this was not the case in this most recent game, where we all finished very close to each other, and it all came down to one of my opponents getting a monopoly on one of the regions and not having a second prize dished out. So I think the setup, one of my opponents managed to win the 10 points with nobody winning the 5 points, which is definitely a huge swing and probably about 25% of your points, if not more. But this is it's an amazing area control game with very simple mechanisms, rolling dice, distributing these little tokens out on these different places. But the lower regions, although they're worth lower points, they will bolster adjacent regions if you win them and make you more likely to win those. It is an ingenious design. I just wish I designed a game like this because it is timeless. It flows wonderfully. The crescendo is incredible. And yeah, I cannot say anything bad about this game at all. I think it is close to perfection. Yeah, you do have to roll with the punches when it comes to the roll of the dice and the luck factor, but it is only a 30-minute game, and it's so addictive, and it's an evergreen for sure. So I've been talking about this one for years, and yeah, I still rate it to the moon. That is Rumble Nation. On to another very simple game. We played I think it was a 3-player game of Savannah Park, and I must admit I've been going through a bit of a dry spell with Savannah Park because all the recent plays I've done really poorly on, but this most recent one I think I managed to win the game and actually maximise quite a lot of the scoring. So this is a Kramer and Kiesling design where you are trying to move these little animal tokens around this board, trying to put the groups of animals together, and they will multiply by the watering holes in that group. But some of these tiles have multiple creatures on them, so you can kind of cross-hatch through them and bleed into each other animal type to try and min-max those scores. There are some other twists and restrictions as well that you need to take into consideration, and this is such a cool game. It's only about 30 minutes long. Only one mechanism. You literally just the active player will choose an animal type, and everybody will pick up that particular tile and move it into a new location. As you play, the board not only opens up, but it also closes down because you create more kind of open spots. But more pieces are being locked into place and cemented. So, and in the higher player count, you actually have less control because you are choosing the animal type less frequently, and it actually makes the game a little bit more interesting, or at least a little bit more chaotic and a little bit more wild. But I still managed to get through the other side of this one really well with quite a few points. Although it was close, it was nice to get a win because that was overdue with Savannah Park. But still, this one I consider an evergreen. It's not going to go anywhere in my collection. That is Savannah Park. Okay, so on to Juru. So I've been itching to get this one back to the table. I managed to play a 3-player game of this area control game, and it's now I'm going to come out and say it. This is one of the best games I've played ever. I think it is a masterpiece in design prowess. It's basically a card-driven area control game, which has a feel of trick-taking, where you're going to have a hand of cards, you're going to be playing a card, and then everybody's going to follow suit if they can. The highest value card will be the essential winner of the round, and that region on this kind of a very simple board where you're going from, you have these different strips which break up these regions, and as the game progresses, the points kind of bleed from the right-hand side to the left-hand side, or filter that way. But basically, you're trying to play these cards. The cards' values will either determine which region you can deploy troops into, or how many action points you have to move your troops around and even eliminate other players troops. But at the same time, if you play the highest value, then the region with your daimyo figure in, your kind of master, will score points. And just because that's where your leader is, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the region you're winning. So sometimes you only want to win the tricks, essentially, when you know that you are winning your own region. And there are so many nuances, there are layers to the strategy here. I love that idea of, you know, going for an early jump in the game and scoring loads of points from this side of the board, but kind of putting yourself under pressure to get those action points in to start shifting these troops along. Otherwise, they're just sat there doing nothing. And because you have such a small, limited pool of your troops, you do not want to waste a single one or waste any deployment kind of power on the board. I am tempted to do a full review of this one because I think it's one of my favourite games of all time and it just needs to be known about. It is borderline, you know, I'd probably give it a 9 out of 10 at this stage, and that has potential to go even higher than that. It only takes around 45 minutes to play. The depth to length ratio is just insane. Great tactics, great strategy, great production, and you know, even a low rules overhead. So I cannot even fault this game. I think it is incredible. That is Juru. The most recent game I played was quite interesting because one of my opponents, as I mentioned, did get a very early lead, quite a significant one actually. And we were really starting to leverage turn order because you do want to be the last player ideally when it comes just before a scoring round so that you can just mess with that board a little bit into your favour. But we managed to close that gap and just about, I think I won. I'm not sure if I did or not. I think that maybe I came second. But there were literally a few points in it, you know, a couple of points from last place to first place, even though we had a completely different game arc. Still, if you don't know about this one, you like area control games, you like card-driven games, then this is close to perfection. And the final game I'm talking about today is Empire's End. So Empire's End is a twist on the no thanks mechanism, which I'm sure you guys would be aware of, where you are basically bidding not to take nasties as the game goes on. But this certainly has a lot more going on when comparing to a game like No Thanks. You have a strip of these buildings which are all worth victory points. You actually start with the victory points, and as the game goes on, you're trying to preserve these victory points and not lose them as these kind of disasters come up, and you're bidding not to take those disasters, which will again destroy a certain building of yours. But whenever you bypass these disasters, you have to give a resource up, which can be the wheat, it can be these axes, which can help you contribute to battles, or these hammers that actually let you rebuild the previously destroyed buildings. As the game goes on, you're also building an engine, kind of creating endgame scoring cards or conversion mechanisms and so on. So there's a lot of different pathways you can go down here. Now, I did take quite a few heavy hits in terms of my most valuable buildings being destroyed, but I did try to monopolise on the military side of things, which managed to serve me well because I was winning pretty much every battle. I also had some nice endgame scoring where I think I was scoring like 3 points per every wheat I had left, and I had quite a lot left at the end of the game. Now, I think very foolishly, during the last battle of the game, despite me having a ton of weapons, I thought I was safe, and I think I bid one of these weapons fewer than I should have, and it ended up costing me like a point, which ended up costing me the game. So definitely a rookie mistake there. I should have just taken that extra step and guaranteed myself the win. But no, c'est la vie, it doesn't really matter. I did actually really enjoy this one. And my first kind of reservations about it were that it does kind of drag its heels. We did only play a 3-player game, and it ended up taking maybe just under an hour, which I think is fair for a game like this. But I think because of the somewhat repetitive nature of the game, it feels a bit longer than it is. I don't want that to sound overly negative because I did actually thoroughly enjoy this recent play, and I would happily play this more, that's for sure. But it's just something to be aware of if you've got your eye on this game. It can feel a little bit repetitive and feel a little bit longer than it actually is. But if you love that mechanism of, you know, bidding resources in order to not take bad things or bad events, then you're going to love this one. It really does build on that no thanks mechanism to a very high standard. And I'm actually really happy to have this one in the collection. So that is Empire's End. And that's it. That's all of the games that I have been playing. I did play a few of the GIF series of games, but I think that's going to be maybe a bit boring to you guys if I keep on mentioning that every single video, because I do play those games a lot. But that's it. That concludes the video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Some great games here. You know, Rumble Nation, Juru, Far Away. Zoovas was thoroughly enjoyable, but I'm not sure if it will stay around much longer. Empire's End was a solid one, and I always love Savannah Park. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.